afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar, Registering Domain Names in Complex Markets. I am a director of Lexsynergy. My name is Daniel Greenberg. I also oversee the brand protection department at Lexsynergy. So today I'll be presenting this webinar. Just so you know how it will work, at the end of the webinar there'll be time for questions and answers. If there are none, our details will be there, so you can email us or call us to discuss any issues you may have or any questions you may have. There's also a chat box function on the WebEx that you can enter your questions if you do have any, which I'll answer at the end of the presentation. So once again, thank you for attending. We also will have another webinar later on in the day for US clients. For the agenda, I'll go through the introduction, get you familiar with one or two terms, discuss common requirements for complex domain names, common issues we face, and we'll highlight specific ccTLD information. I'll get into that in more detail later. And then, like I said, questions and answers at the end of the webinar. So a little bit about Lexsynergy. We are a corporate domain name registrar. We assist clients in securing domain names all around the world and globally. We're all aware of .com, .co.uk, and .net. And the reason for this is they went to market early, they're cheap, easy to register, normally on a first-come, first-served basis without any restrictions. But not all domain name extensions were created equal, so some are extremely difficult to register. And by this I mean filling out forms, faxing, paying by Western Union, and in some cases sending messages by pigeon. It does sound a bit funny, but you know, there's some strange ways of registering domain names in certain jurisdictions. But this is where we come in. Not only do we do the straightforward domain name extensions to help businesses centralize and manage their global portfolio, but we operate in more complex jurisdictions, making sure that you can secure a domain name to provide clients with a local presence online, as well as defensive registrations that they can use at a later date. There are quite a few complex domain name extensions out there, but we've chosen a few today to select that we commonly deal with. So if you need any help with any domain name extension not mentioned today, get in touch with us and we'll see how we can assist you. In addition to the domain name management side, we also recover infringing domain names and take down fraudulent websites or those that infringe trademarks and copyright. As you can see from the slide, we have offices in the UK, Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, the US, and Australia. So that's a little bit about ourselves. I will now jump into ccTLDs. So I've been referring to that part on the right after the dot of a web address as a domain name extension. But in the industry, we call it a top-level domain. I apologize for those that are familiar with the term, but for those that don't, a top-level domain name, or TLD, is then divided into a country code top-level domain, or a ccTLD, and a generic top-level domain, or GTLDs. GTLDs are those that are not assigned to a country and are generic in nature, such as .com. Most are unrestricted, while some like .bank is reserved for banks, so it is restricted. We'll not deal with GTLDs today. We'll deal with ccTLDs, those domain name extensions that are assigned to a specific country, such as .CO.KE for Kenya, .com.gh for Ghana, and .ca for Canada. Each country extension or ccTLD has its own rules that have been established by its local registry operator or governing body, with the result that these rules and regulations can differ substantially. This means that there could be a local presence requirement or other similar requirements to localize a domain name extension for that country. This could include also having its own procedures when handling disputes within that country extension. If there are, like I said, if there are any domain name extensions that you want to discuss today during the webinar, please paste that into the chat box, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them for you. So, certain country extensions require the registrant to have a local presence. This means an established registered business ought to be a citizen of the country. In some cases, they ask for supporting documents to prove the local presence eligibility. In those that do not require it upfront, like Canada, registrants could have their domain names deleted if they are found out. So in this particular slide, it's the common requirements for the more complex TLDs. In some other markets, they require a local registered trademark. There are a few exceptions to that would accept a pending application, but in most cases, it needs to be a registered trademark. So countries like Turkey and Ireland ask that you have a connection to the country in that you have conducted business there or have licensees or agents based in those countries. So those are the points that normally come up. There are a few odd ones here and there, but generally those are the most common ones we see in our day-to-day business. Common issues. These are common issues that we are faced as a global registrar, and we have to take these issues, digest them, translate them for our clients in a coherent manner. We do our best in that, but we are at the beck and call of some of these registry operators. We want to make you aware of these issues so you do understand the complexity in some of these ccTLDs and how difficult it is to register a domain name there. The first issue is language barrier. The operator of a domain name or registry could communicate and have documents and request documents in a foreign language. So we do have employees at Lexsynergy that speak multiple languages. However, sometimes we have to provide company documents to a registry. A registry operator manages the TLDs, so they require it to be in their local language, requiring translations and additional work surrounding that. Also, communications can be a problem with that. Unreliable registries. In some cases, registries do not have a formalized support team, so you are forced to deal with one person, and when they're not around, nothing gets done. An example is one TLD in Africa where the particular person that deals with registrars like ourselves passed away and no one took his place for a number of weeks, so nothing was done. Another issue is offline procedures and formalities. Filling out forms, faxing or emailing them can often lead to errors and slow processing of urgent requests. So this is where you literally have to fill out a form, send it off. So if you have to update name servers or any other critical information, it can take some time before that is done. But we normally advise clients of this, but it's just some additional background information. Another common issue is lack of defined rules and procedures. So we've had an experience where the registry does not have an operational website with no supporting documentation. So we're basically at their mercy when it comes to registrations and the management of domain names under their particular ccTLD. In these cases, they seem to set up ad hoc rules to deal with each registration. What we try and do from experience is to cover all the bases so we know what to expect and have appropriate responses and documentation when required, sometimes preempting this by supplying it in advance. Some examples of some issues we've had registries who have doubled the price of a domain name without notice. We have some seeing that a certain policy doesn't work, they change it without documenting it or communicating it to the registries. And sometimes the staff are poorly trained, so we get inconsistent responses. Another issue is know who is. And the who is what most people use to determine the information connected to the registration of a domain name, such as registration date, name servers, and the registrant's information, the owner of the domain name. And a number of registries don't publish their who is, which means there's no way of determining if the information was populated correctly or if the domain name is registered. We usually check this by seeing if the domain name does in fact point to site after the request. Another issue with Know Who is that if you do purchase a SSL certificate, sometimes it's required that the SSL company issuing the certificate verify the ownership of that particular domain name. And with these more difficult countries that do not have a WHOIS, it's very difficult to do this. So there are ways around that we've handled for some clients in the past. So if you have any issues like that, let us know. But it does frustrate the process a bit. So getting into our first country, there are a few that I'm highlighting in this particular webinar. The first is Chad, which is a landlocked country located in Central Africa. It's French-speaking. So we find many French companies trying to secure the domain names in this country. While there are no restrictions to register .td domain name, the process is slow and time-consuming, with basic actions such as name server updates taking a few days, and in worst cases, a few weeks. So if you want to secure a domain name in Chad, just make sure that you are aware of these delays and factor that into your usage plan. So if you have to make urgent updates, you need to do this a few weeks in advance. Interestingly enough, there are no restrictions in Chad, and because it's relatively undeveloped from a domain name perspective, a lot of trademark owners are seeking to secure their domain names within this particular TLD. Not all registrars offer this extension, but it is important within the African region just because of the potential that this market does create for a lot of opportunists, and as well as the business opportunities over there. The next one is Zambia, another African country, but in the southern region. This ccTLD has a local presence requirement. Due to its relevance in African markets, we have set up a local presence in that country, which we use to assist clients with defensive registrations. And once they set up their own local presence, they may want to initially register the domain name for defensive purposes. So once they are set up, they are free to move over to their contact information, and then the domain name is updated so they are recorded as the owner of the domain name. A local presence is advised where you want to enter a market or there is the potential. A lot of people, when they launch a business, especially from English-speaking countries, they tend to focus on securing crucial domain names in other English-speaking countries, one of which is Zambia. So it should be on the radar. It is a developing market. And if you have an international brand, you know, the internet is open to all. So if you do have users or any customers from that country, it's advisable to secure a domain name there. The Zambian registry does not accept digital application forms and requests all registrations to be handwritten. This is quite a unique thing with the registry, but that's something that we process on our end. So there is a bit of a delay when it comes to ZM registrations, but it's not as bad as Chad, so it's normally about 1 to 2 days waiting time to have any updates or registrations processed. Moving on to another more complex TLD is .au, the extension for Australia. The most common ccTLD is com.au and net.au. The Australians see their extension as a national asset that is reserved for the benefit of those in that country. This means that you have to have a local company registered or a local registered trademark or be a citizen of that country. In most cases, the information is required during the registration process. The registry also frowns upon those that use a local presence to circumvent the localized rules. If found out, it could result in your domain name being deleted. So be very careful if you have used a local presence in the past, that nothing goes wrong with that. In the past, it has happened that a registry operator was providing a local presence freely to any party wishing to secure a com.au domain name, with the result that nearly the entire domain name portfolio was deleted by the registry. I'm not too sure how they managed to rescue that situation, but it was very bad indeed. So if you intend to register a domain name in Australia, you could file a trademark or register your company as a foreign registered company. So Lexsynergy has a foreign, as a UK company, we've registered a foreign company in Australia. It's slightly more cost effective than setting up a new company. It does seem like a lot of work to go through the effort of registering a company or filing a trademark to register a domain name, but it is a lot cheaper than trying to recover a domain name. So we've had experience with Australian squatters who see an international brand not yet in their country, knowing that they may enter Australia at a later date, so they register the identical matching domain name. The trademark owner, who may not have any rights in Australia, is then forced to purchase the domain name at a substantial cost. So in this exercise in trying to secure a domain name, you are in fact extending your trademark rights in that particular country. And we find it quite often that mainly American companies that start off obviously in the US, then expand to Europe and other English-speaking countries, and then by the time they get to Australia, they realize the domain name is gone. They're forced to use an alternative or pay a lot of money to recover it. The next extension is Canada. Canada is very similar to Australia. However, it is not required to establish proof of a local presence or trademark at the point of registering your domain name. The registry does conduct random checks, and if you found out that you do not qualify for a .ca domain name, they will ask for such documentation to ensure you comply, and they do cooperate. So, you know, if you do need to submit the documents, those documents, they are quite patient with that and do work with you to make sure that you have the correct information. If the information cannot be supplied, the domain name may be deleted. So just make sure that with Canada that you either have a local presence, a local trademark, or have a local citizen register the domain name for you. Like I say, they do random checks. So sometimes it does happen that some people get through the system and register a domain name without complying with the local presence requirements. To register .ie domain name, an Irish domain name, all applicants, it's available to anyone that is based or is situated in the 32 counties of Ireland, and what you have to show is a real and substantive connection with Ireland. So one of the exceptions is if you have a community trademark. This is a trademark that covers the European Union. Since you have trademark rights within the European Union, that affords you the right to register a .ie domain name. So what you have to do is you have to show that you do have some connection with Ireland. So if you don't have a company in Ireland or you don't have a registered trademark in that country, then what we would suggest is to show, you would have to supply proof that you do deal or you do conduct business in Ireland, you have some sort of commercial relationship with that company, and there are ways of establishing that, and we've helped a lot of clients that didn't have any trademark rights or local presence, but we were able to establish that they do have a connection to that country. Moving on to the next slide, Argentina. This is quite a difficult TLD for this South American country. It's a registrant, a potential registrant, must go through a lengthy and costly verification process administered by the registry. A local presence is not required if the foreign organization has been verified. And in order to be verified, the registrant must provide signed documents, copy of a company certificate, or a passport, which must be apostilled, with the originals being sent to the registry so they can verify these documents and approve the registrant. This takes about 1 to 2 weeks from the date of submission, and once verified, you can register your domain names without restriction. So if you do have a presence in Argentina, we would, if you require an Argentinian domain name, we suggest that you do go through this route to make sure that you are verified. It makes processing registrations very easy. Otherwise, you need a local presence or a local trademark. Another point worth mentioning is that the policies are subject to change at any time with no notice, as this happened a few months ago, where the entire registry panel was changed and was administered by a new government entity. So, you know, sometimes we're at the beck and call of these ccTLD operators. CN is the next extension I want to briefly go through. Is .cn is assigned to China. It's not necessary, funny enough, I'll correct that slide. It's not, you don't need a local presence or a local trademark. But what you do need for China is you need to submit proof of a company or your personal ID. Otherwise, your domain name will be suspended. So it isn't really a restriction. It's more of a formality in that. Malaysia, I'm just going to pop to the next slide, and Singapore. Those are two countries that are kind of aligned. So they have very similar rules in that you need to have a local presence. To get around that requirement, we do offer local presence, so you have the opportunity to secure defensive registrations. In Singapore, the admin contact, the administrative contact must be local, so registrations can be in your company name, while in Malaysia, the registrant and admin contact must be based in that country, so that would be the local presence that we would supply so you can secure your domain name in that particular TLD. Another country or country code top-level domain is CO.KE for Kenya. That is where they require a local presence, but the admin contact would need to be based in that country. We have actually set up a physical office in Kenya just because of the growth in that region, so we can assist clients with registrations under CO.KE being the most popular TLD, local TLD in Kenya. And in addition, to become a Kenyan registrar, you need to have a local company, which we are, so it does make the process slightly easier. To make things a little bit more complicated with .KE, like I said in the previous slide, CO.KE is currently the most popular local domain extension in Kenya. However, recently the Kenyan registry, without much notice, launched .KE, which means now instead of registering Lexsynergy.co.ke, you can register Lexsynergy.ke. So it's directly at the second level. This makes it shorter and more attractive domain name that hopefully can become more popular in the country. The local admin contact requirement remains. However, the launch of the extension is currently in the sunrise phase, but has a few flaws in the launch process. So firstly, the sunrise period will last 90 days, and it started, I think, about 2 weeks ago. And if you have a registered Kenyan trademark, you can apply for the matching.ke before it's released to the general public. But the trademark must be registered under the Trademarks Act in Kenya, and a copy of the trademark certificate will be required, and you have to have it verified by a Kenyan trademark lawyer with good standing with the Law Society of Kenya. So we can process this on your behalf. We work with a lot of resellers as well as direct brand owners to get this, their marks verified. After the sunrise phase comes the land rush phase, and in which domain names can be registered at a higher price. If there's more than one application for the same domain name, it will go through to auction and sold to the highest bidder. After this phase is where the issues really start. There's no grandfathering phase, which means, or we haven't been informed if there is one, that means if you had or have a co.ke domain name, say for example you have business.co.ke, so you cannot file the trademark business because business is a descriptive word and not capable of being registered as a trademark, so you cannot secure it in the sunrise phase. Say if you've missed the land rush for some reason, what will happen is it will be opened up to any party to register. So it doesn't give you any preference because you've got the co.ke. So someone, a third party, could register the matching domain name, maybe business.ke, and compete with you. So there are many businesses out there that will land up having a domain name that is kind of identical except for the extension, which is shorter, matching their online presence, and that's a major issue. So if you do have a CO.KE, get in touch with us so we can make sure that you put in the queue that you can secure your domain names as early as possible to prevent any of these issues cropping up at a later date. Another extension is CO.TZ, and this is the extension assigned to Tanzania. It does have a local admin requirement like its neighbor Kenya. The one difference is that it is legislated that if you operate a Tanzanian company, you need to use or have registered a CO.TZ domain name. So that's something to be aware of if you do business in that country. I'm not too sure how they do check these. Another extension is Norway. Norway has a nice extension, the word no. We think .NO is intended to put off would-be registrants, as you need to have a local company or be a citizen or resident of that country. The catch is that as a company, you can only have 100 registrations, which makes a local presence service expensive, as you have to register a new company for every 100 domain names you register. So at least the company's office in Norway is making a lot of money with a lot of company registrations. Another country maybe some of you have not heard of is Guinea-Bissau, an African country. It's worth mentioning them because they sometimes randomly select applicants to prove trademark or company name rights that match a domain name. So sometimes they can, without reason, reject. For instance, a client may have rights to common law rights, which are unregistered rights, but they cannot show it. So the domain name, so they're not able to register the domain name. So there's a lot of inconsistency with this particular registry that we've had a lot of issues with in the past. So before we go into questions, I just want to let you know that we couldn't go through all the complex domain names, but the ones we have discussed, I've discussed today, highlights that not all domain names are easy to register, and it requires proper guidance and effective domain name registration strategy. Just because it's difficult to register does not mean it should be ignored, as this could expose your business to, or your brand to a local squatter in a jurisdiction that has limited mechanisms to recover an infringing domain name. So it's sometimes recommended to rather be proactive by identifying the more complex jurisdictions or high-risk extensions where they're squatting, and take steps to mitigate this risk by securing the domain name. What I'm not saying go on a registration spree and register domain names that are around the world and spend thousands of dollars, but rather register domain names that are an identical match of your trademark in these complex jurisdictions. It's far cheaper to have a domain name registration than have to deal with the fallout of not securing a domain name. So we've worked with many brand owners to secure domain names through our local presence service, or at least help them find solutions to meet the local requirements, so they have the reassurance that their domain name is waiting for them when they start trading in that particular jurisdiction. So if you do have any questions about these domain name extensions discussed or others, you can enter them in the webinar chat box, and I'll answer them, or you can send through an email to us. Our details are listed on this particular slide. Also, if you want to know where your brand is positioned in the domain name space, let us know, and we can conduct a global domain name audit for you, which is a snapshot of what you own, what is being infringed, and recommendations on what domain names to register to close any gaps. So we can then work with you to build up a defensive registration and enforcement strategy that could assist your brand. So I'm just looking if there are any questions. I cannot see any at the moment. So with that, I would just like to thank you once again for attending the webinar. It will be available on our YouTube channel, and there'll be another live webinar later today. So once again, thank you for attending.